Hello，大家好。歡迎大家今日咧去到我哋今日呢一個training 啦sharing 嘅 section 啦。咁今日我哋呢個training 嘅 sharing 嘅 topic 咧就係how to utilize golden thread of information for better asset management。咁喺我哋開始正式邀請我哋嘅嘉賓training sharing 之前咧，我哋會首先俾我哋嘅chairman 啦，阿 Simon 咧做一個開場嘅 opening 先嘅，有請阿 Simon。
好，hello，大家好。咁
Hello，聽到你
咧
講嘢。
，hello，聽到。好，咁我 share 我個 screen 先。好，大家見唔見到啊？到嘛？
見到。
好，咁各位大家 Beamers 大家好。咁我係 Simon 嚇。咁中秋節就到啦嚇。首先咧，祝大家中秋節快樂先啦嚇。好，咁我係 Simon 嚇。係HKIBIM 嘅 chairman。咁我開場白講少少啦嚇。嗱，咁其實咧過往咧，即係其實嗱，呢度好簡單講一句嘅啫，即係我哋 HKIBIM 係香港最大嘅代表，專注去全力推動 BIM 嘅一個團體啦嚇。我哋2009年成立，我哋嚟緊咧準備係我哋15週年嘅慶祝嘅嚇。咁而家至今咧有超過1300位嘅會員㗎啦嚇。咁其他啲詳細介紹咧，其實我過去好多場合咧都有介紹過啦，咁我今日唔再特別多講嘅。咁咧嗱，其實咧我哋過往咧就舉辦咗好多嘅 webinar，即係好似今日嘅 webinar 咁啦，咁有 award 啦，咁樣華山論 BIM 啦，甚至我哋就好創意咁作咗我哋就一首 BIM 嘅一個主題嘅歌曲啦。咁嗱，我哋亦都有我哋嘅 publicity 啦咁我哋咧就係咧有我哋嘅 website hkibim.org 咁入邊有晒我哋最新嘅資訊㗎啦。咁我哋 social media 啦，我哋 Facebook 啦、LinkedIn 啦、YouTube channel 啦，咁樣等等嘅。咁咧值得一齊咧，我哋啱啱咧新鮮滾熱辣整咗我哋嗰個WeChat 嘅 channel 咁大家可以咧去掃一掃呢個 QR code 咧，或者喺上 WeChat 嗰度咧 search 亦都可以揾到我哋嘅。咁亦都可以喺即係有另外一個 social media 可以睇到我哋嘅一啲最新嘅資訊嘅。好啦嗱，咁講下最近一啲 update 啦咁其實正如頭先所講啦，其實我哋作為代表全香港推動 BIM 咁我哋亦都即係有個少少嘅使命感，就係我哋希望同政府係我哋一個即係推動 BIM 嘅一個決策者，咁我哋都會希望定期會同佢哋咧去溝通多啲，可以代表到業界所有 BIMers 嘅一啲心聲，或者一啲想點樣去推動 BIM 嘅建議啊。咁所以我哋咧喺7月咧，亦都同發展局咧開咗一個會，咁你作咗一個呢個非常之深度嘅交流嘅咁即係大家都知道，即係發展局由2018年開始有個 BIM mandate所有即係政府 project 要用 BIM 啦咁另外即係咁呢幾年咁市場嘅發展係點咧係有啲咩正面或者有啲咩可改善嘅地方咧，我哋都係作咗好深度嘅交流咁咧其實咧，亦都咧跟住咧，喺呢個特首咧，亦都正在準備緊佢嘅施政報告咧。咁咧，我哋學會都好榮幸咧，係俾佢邀請咧，係參加佢哋嗰個即係 consultation 嘅 forum 啦，佢哋嗰個即係諮詢嘅大會啦。咁我當然亦都係希望即係趁呢個機會咧，去要求政府喺 BIM 嗰度係更加多重視嘅例如即係佢哋話特首有提過話，希望喺做 BD 上面上希望盡快落實。咁我哋亦都希望呢一樣嘢係佢哋會繼續去堅持呢一樣嘢。咁我哋都會提供更加多嘅技術嘅支援嘅咁等等。好啦，咁咧其實咧我快少少啦，講下一啲即係我哋學會咧即將會舉辦嘅嘢咁亦都我哋會有好多好豐富嘅活動例如第一個咧就係HKIBM Award 啦咁我哋而家就隔2年搞一次嘅。咁咧而家其實已經係即係 call for submission 緊㗎啦咁我哋照個 categories 咧有3個 projects 啦。咁我哋今年除咗正常嘅即係政府 project 或者私人 project 或者 mega project 咁啦，我哋今次亦都新增咗有啲其他嘅 category 嘅，例如 minor works 啦咁或者 BIM initiative 呢個過幾年都有嘅咁今年我哋會繼續啦minor works 意思即係話 政府係超過3000萬嘅 project 一定要行 BIM，但係有冇啲細過3000萬，但係都主動去行 BIM 咧？我哋都希望表揚到呢方面嘅一啲 projects 嘅。嗱 organizations 啦嚇，咁好多即係公司嘅 BIM team 嚇，我哋今年亦都新增咗咧，其實唔係新增嘅，係一啲即係比較中小企啦、startup 啦，咁都係有佢哋即係有佢哋唔同嘅 categories 嘅。咁啊 BIM of the year 啦，咁講有 Young BIMers 啦，或者係成年嘅 BIMers 啦，咁你都有多一個咧叫 Most Valuable BIMer 嚇，即係好似萬千星輝大獎咁嚇對你。咁如果大家覺得自己係可能係屬於 Young BIMer 啊，定係屬於 BIMer 啊，定 MVP 啊，你哋都可以去申請嘅嚇。咁我哋今年嘅主題叫做 Building Better with BIMers 啊，咁亦都即係我哋學會嘅宗旨嚇，我哋希望團結到所有嘅 BIMers 嚇，令到呢個行業係更加先進。好嗱，咁其實而家已經係 cover 緊 submission 㗎啦。咁其實咧如果你哋即係你哋 work 緊個 project 啊，或者你 work 緊機構，或者你自己個人有興趣嘅，咁咧可以咧我哋嘅 early bird 咧就30號就 deadline 㗎啦嚇。咁你可以咧上網報咗名先，咁就early bird 咧就係大家填咗基本嘅資料就得㗎啦嚇。咁 full submission 咧咁就10月20號 deadline 嘅嚇。咁你如果你3號之前報咗名 show 咗 interest 先嘅，咁咧即係嗰個報名費就會平少少嘅嚇。咁我哋嘅 award ceremony 咁都定咗係1月26號啦。咁希望過年之前可以頒到個獎出嚟，大家食餐飯咁樣嘅嚇。咁就呢個香港 HKIBIM award 啦。好啦嗱，咁咧另外咧接住落嚟咧，我哋都有會搞緊一個 conference 嘅嚇。咁係一個中國圖學會嘅全國嘅 conference 嚇。咁咧啱今年啦，2023年咧，佢就喺第10屆就喺成都嘅，即係佢係一個全國性嘅一個 conference 嚟嘅嚇。咁佢就今年嘅年中咧就喺成都，咁咧佢哋已經確定咗咧嚟緊下一屆第11屆咧就會係喺香港嗰度舉行嚇。咁咧我哋咧亦都係聯結咗咧就呢個粵港大灣區城市建築學會啦，同埋呢個BIMA啦嚇，係做一個 co-organizer 嘅。咁而家基本上個初型已經有喺度啦。咁大家記住嘅日子會係日子就係24年嘅5月30、31號。地點咧，我哋都暫定喺海洋公園嘅 Marriott 酒店。哇，正啊，係嘛？咁一個幾靚嘅幾超嘅地方嚟㗎嚇。咁一個2日嘅 conference 啦。咁當然會即係有 conference 應該有㗎啦，會請呢啲比較重量級嘅人物會有啲 keynote speech 啦。咁亦都會有分部嘅一啲嘅 conference。嗱呢個咧就係第10屆成都嗰屆咧，佢哋嗰個 sample 係佢哋嗰個內容啦。即係話佢哋有除咗 keynote 之後咧，佢會有唔同嘅專題嘅 breakout room 嘅嚇。咁到時亦都會係咁樣嘅 format 啦。咁亦都咧會喺第2日咧嘅下晝咧會有啲 site 嘅 visit。咁我哋去參觀一啲做得 BIM 比較好嘅一啲 project 項目嗰度參觀嘅。好啦，咁所以大家千祈唔好錯㗎啦。嗱，記低住5月30、31號嚇，記低個日子去。好啦，嗱，咁頭先正如頭先講過啦，咁我哋嚟緊我哋會有15週年啦，我哋學會，咁我哋都會有一系列嘅 events 嘅嚇。咁咧第一個其實咧如果大家咧對設計有一啲嘅諗法大家設計啲才華咧，歡迎你參加我哋15週年嘅 logo design competition。咁30號 deadline啦。如果你諗下，揾部機揾隻手畫兩畫，我哋有冇15週年嘅一個好靚嘅 logo 又有意思嘅 logo 咧？我哋歡迎大家嚟到去投稿嘅咁我哋即係呢個 logo 咧就會應用喺我哋將來所有15週年嘅 event 嘅上面，所以係一個非常之榮譽嘅一個任務嚟嘅咁其實我哋都一路喺度構思緊其他嘅唔同嘅一啲 event 啦例如咧有一個咧我哋叫 video competition 而家暫時透露少少先啦咁其實大家常規嘅 BIM award 或者 BIM competition 可能大家都見過好多啦，係嘛？咁不如搞新意思啦，搞個 video 大家而家好興有啲 views 大家講30秒鐘，講60秒鐘嘢咁嚟講下 BIM 係乜嘢或者介紹一啲 你一啲 BIM 嘅一啲產物啦嚇，或譬如話咩叫 BIM coordination 啊嚇，咩叫 crash detection 啊，咁呢啲可以講下。又或者可以你對行業嘅發展有啲咩睇法啊？咁呢個 video 可以即係俾大家一展所長啊。咁啊呢個詳情就會容後公佈嚇。咁咧我哋亦都咧即係打算咧會整一本15週年嘅特刊嘅嚇。咁希望記錄翻香港過往15年嚟BIM發生緊咩事啦，進化緊啲咩啦嚇，或者將來有啲咩展望啦嚇。咁有啲咩會員，有啲咩 BIMer 嘅朋友咧係覺得係個文青係好想咧寫下嘢嘅話咧，不妨聯絡我哋啊嚇。咁我哋而家都 recruit 緊一啲嘅 helpers 嘅。咁我哋未來仲有好多15週年嚇，或者其他 BIM 嘅一啲嘅活動啊。好啦，咁呢度亦都順帶一提啦嚇。咁咧其實咧過往咧，其實我哋嘅 member 會員咧都係 individual member。咁我哋而家咧都 call for 緊咧，其實不嬲都有一個 category 叫 corporate member 嘅。咁我哋今年咧希望即係將佢再加強即係宣傳多啲啦。咁其實咧即係我哋希望代表即係聯合到個業界咧，唔淨止係個人嘅。咁我哋都希望咧係喺即係有啲公司佢有心推行 BIM 咧，我哋都會俾一個即係 identity 咧嚇，係一個你係間 BIM 嘅有心推行 BIM 嘅公司嚇，或者你係間 BIM 有能力嘅公司嚇。咁呢個亦都係即係我哋希望去到即係聯合到呢啲咁嘅公司。咁我哋咧亦都會 form 即係 corporate member，我哋 form 個小組嘅嚇，咁會聆聽大家嘅 corporate members 嘅一啲意見。所以咧其實調翻轉嘅説話就係，即係你哋都會有份去參與 BIM 嘅香港發展啦嚇。咁我哋亦都有好多嘅 benefit 嚇，俾到我哋嘅 corporate members 嘅嚇。咁詳情可以上我哋個網去睇睇嚇。好啦，嗱咁咧呢個咧 App Store 啦，咁亦都係即係承接今年年初嘅時候，我哋搞咗叫華山論 BIM 啊 Automation Arena 嘅。咁咧其實咧，我哋發覺原來其實業界咧有好多好嘢嘅，有好多人寫咗一啲 automation 嘅自動化嘅功能嚇。咁其實我哋亦都邀請咗佢哋咧，有部分咧係好願意 share 俾大家，將佢啲好嘢咧係 share 俾大家，令到大家做嘢更加 efficient，更加有效率。咁所以咧，我哋亦都搭建咗呢個 App Store，我哋而家已經係進行最後嘅測試㗎啦。咁應該咧好快咧就會推出去市面啊。咁所以就係咁啦。好啦，咁所以咧，即係我哋個學會係即係一班有心嘅 BIMers 去組織嘅啊。咁我哋都為行業咧推動咗好多嘢，我哋都有非常之多嘅新嘢嘅。所以咧，大家即係記住留意住follow 我哋嘅web page 啦，同埋我哋嘅 social media 啦，同埋我哋最新嘅 WeChat 咁樣等等嚇，好嘛？咁我就時間差唔多啦，咁我交翻俾大會，咁希望大家 enjoy 你今日嘅 CPD 啊嚇。好，唔該 Kevin。
好，唔該晒 Chairman 嘅。咁the following the sharing session will be conducted in English. So today we are a great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Evan, to join us today. So Evan is a BIM lead of the Arab. He's leading the project, including the MTL Tung Chung Line extension, 𝗪𝗲𝗯𝗶H and various large-scale projects in Thailand. He's also an active member of HKIBIM. He's during the event, including the Automation Arena, BIM Award Ceremony, and the dinner. So now I will give the time to Evan to start his presentation.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Simon.
No problem.
Thanks, Guan. Hi, everyone. And let me just share my screen and we can get going. Yes, as Kevin said, my name's Ewan. I'm a senior consultant at Arab, and my focus is BIM. But today, the sharing session that I'll be talking about is all about asset management, also facility management, and how we make sure that the models that we produce during design and construction are handed over, make sure that the information in those models are appropriate for asset management and operations. A lot of the people that we talk to, because well, myself is in consultancy, that it's rare that we talk about this side of things. So I think it's important to talk about. So if I could start by just introducing Arab as a company. I'm sure most of you know who we are, but essentially we are a multinational design company, over 1,700 staff worldwide, covering 33 countries. And the tagline is "Together we shape a better world." But it is true in that we, together as in us, 1,700, as well as our clients, as well as our collaborators as well. Inside East Asia, the region that I'm responsible for, we have a number of different offices across the region. The region includes Japan, Korea, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam as well. And the head office in Hong Kong has just celebrated its 45th year last year, so we've been here working quite a while. As for the services that we provide, we do the typical services that you'd expect from a design consultancy, like the civil, structural, MEP, architectural, this sort of thing. But we also offer consultancy, so advisory services around security, sustainability, acoustic, but also digital, facilities management, and asset management. So those are the three that I'm going to focus on today. But delving into the digital side, we don't just do things in the BIM sphere. We also do other stuff. But just talking about the BIM sphere, we do offer services both internally for our projects, so BIM manager, CDE setup, managing models, this sort of thing. But we also offer our services as a consultancy or advisory service to clients. So we have worked with clients to set up their standards, document all their information requirements as well. So we do a broad from start to finish of sort of projects. But as a team, as an BIM advisory team in the region, there's quite a few members across the different offices. Ray, who's based in Hong Kong, is the lead. Myself, I look after the Hong Kong office. 𝗪𝗯𝗶 in Ho Chi Minh City, 𝗪𝗲𝗍 in Bangkok, and Edmundo in Manila. We work together quite seamlessly, and we share responsibility on different projects. As Kevin said at the introduction, I have been working on Thailand projects. So, for example, one of the big projects we worked on was a high-speed rail project, which Ray was the leader. Myself, 𝗪𝗯𝗶, and 𝗪𝗲𝗍 also were BIM managers in different packages of that high-speed rail line. And as you can see, we do offer quite a lot of services. On top of this, we have a global BIM skills network, which Ray taps into. And this is where we share global best practice. Actually saw Rishi, who's the Australasia lead, join this call as well. So hi, Rishi. But yeah, we tend to share good best practice, and from that global skills network, that's where we disseminate our global initiatives, like our global Revit standard, and other things like this. So it works quite like a seamless sort of global initiative. But for the other digital services that we have in East Asia, we have a digital focus group that looks after the broad range of digital services. So Ray looks after the BIM advisory, as I just said, but we also have the digital design team headed by Ramon. I'm sure you saw him at the BIM Automation Arena. They won a prize for their total design automation platform. But we also have advanced digital engineering run by Sankar, and we have Arab University run by Ricky. And together we do work together on projects quite well. So examples of this would be for some of the BIM advisory work we do. We work as BIM auditors on certain projects. But if anyone has experience of this, you'll know checking models for data compliance is a time-consuming process. And so doing it manually would be very, very difficult. So this is why we engage with our digital design team, and they help us, find ways to automate the process so that we can extract the data, check the compliance, and extract reports from it, sort of automatically, which is, saves a lot of time. With the advanced digital engineering team, we work with them on a project for the Chinese Temple Committee. We were contracted to digitize their assets, but a lot of the buildings that we had to digitize, a lot of it was, the historical elements. A lot of it was walls, ceilings, architectural, MEP stuff. So there was a BIM aspect to that as well. So we worked together on that project. And then between us and Arab University, we make sure that each of the teams have the required amount of CIC certified BIM managers and BIM coordinators to fulfill their requirements on projects and also bid for projects. So that's how we all work together as teams. But speaking of projects, as I mentioned, the Chinese Temple Committee, the CTC, we work digitizing. We've worked on a project where we are digitizing their assets and also their facility management processes. One of the biggest, not hurdles, but one of the most unique parts of this project is because it's a heritage project, it's very hard to, get an agreement on what is considered an asset and what's not considered an asset. Is that they have a lot of historical walls, for example. Is that an asset or is that just a part of the design of the building? So it's there was a give and take that had to be done there. Another project we have is to do with is working for EMSD, the Electrical Mechanical Services Department. I don't know if many of you know, but recently they've just come out with their version 3.0 of their BIM asset management guidelines. And so we were asked by EMSD to interrogate a model that was set up or built based off 2.0, check the gap between the two, report that to them, and also upgrade the model so that it can be uploaded onto the system. I have a few more slides about this later, but there is some work that needs to be done. It's not a seamless process, so that's why they brought us in to do that work. And then, as Kevin said, and also I said, that we've been working in Thailand as well. So there's been a number of different Thailand projects across large-scale mixed-use developments, high-speed rails. For these projects, we worked with a client to document their asset information requirements, their organizational information requirements, and their exchange information requirements. I will go into those later for those who are unsure what those documents are, but essentially it's documenting their information requirements up front. And yeah, we follow that process at the start, and these projects are ongoing, so we're waiting to see how they develop. And for the DT Campus Digital Twin, our client is looking to provide, to develop a smart campus. But for that, we need to make sure all the requirements are set up correctly at the start so that all the asset information is passed on into the operation seamlessly and everything can link up. So that's our role in that project as well. So yeah, we've been busy with regards to asset information for sure. And finally, I just want to introduce myself. So again, I'm Ewan Carmichael, a senior consultant focusing on BIM. I'm also a chartered mechanical engineer. So I'm chartered with IMechE as well as the HKIE. But I'm also a professional member of this institute, the HKIBIM, and also a certified CIC BIM manager. As Kevin said at the start, I've been a BIM manager for a number of years now, working on large infrastructure projects, including the BHS APM tunnel just behind me at the airport, but also the Suho 1 depot development and MTR Tung Chung line extension. But I think the thing of my experience that helps me, talk about this sort of stuff is the thing at the bottom there, where in the UK, I worked for 4 years on a nuclear power station as part of the maintenance and operations team. So I had firsthand experience of, having bad data, not being able to understand what things are, what they're linked to. And so I will try and share some anecdotes throughout this presentation about, where things can go wrong and why, the implications of not getting it right. But just to kick us off, I thought I'd have a couple of quotes from some, more intelligent people than myself. First of all, Albert Einstein. I like this quote because it kind of emphasizes the whole thing, the whole point around BIM, the whole point about CDEs and single source of truth. And it's, as long as if everyone knows where to find the right information, everyone can do the job much more efficiently. You're not stupid, you're intelligent. But also for facility management, when you're on site and you don't know where the right information is, and you use the wrong information, then you can get things wrong. So it's quite an important quote. And then another one by Peter Drucker. So Peter Drucker was an academic looking at sort of management science. And it sort of leads on to things like digital twins and smart facility management, in that if you have the right information and if you get the right information to the right people at the right time, they can make very informed decisions a lot more efficiently. And so it kind of feeds into the whole what we're trying to do as well. But to start us off for the actual topic today, I thought I'd start at the reason why this is important. So start at why we want to make sure all these models are in line, and it's to do with the facility management. So facility and asset management, the purpose of them on any project or on any sort of building or asset is making sure it works, making sure things continue to operate as they are supposed to. This can be either hard facility management, like this man inspecting a pumping system, or it can be soft, like cleaning. So there's a variety of different things that facility management teams do, but it's a very important role in the operational side of buildings and assets. Some of the typical tasks, day-to-day tasks that a facility management team will carry out include things like routine inspection and inspection of important assets. So things like, making sure pressure of a pump is within range or within the sort of the allowed sort of pressure range. That's the sort of thing they would do on a day-to-day basis. They would record this and store, record this and store this in a secure way. But they also carry out things like routine maintenance. So every piece of equipment will have a manufacturing spec. In that manufacturing spec, it will tell you, the seals or the fan or the certain parts of a asset needs to be maintained at a certain frequency. This will be associated with, a working schedule for the maintenance staff. And this is where the spares come in as well. So making sure that your spares are in line and available for when that maintenance happens. And so it's quite a lot of interlinking sort of operations, and it's quite important to get it right. So what was it like back in the day? My role on site was about 10 years ago, so it was kind of halfway to becoming digitized, but I still had to, go into the archives, find the shelves of binders where drawings and specifications and operation manuals and all this sort of stuff was kept. But it did highlight to me what some of the risk or some of the problems with it is, in that you have a lot of different documentation that's produced at different times by different people. And sometimes the naming convention doesn't follow through. So you'll have pumps that are named 4 times in 4 different pieces of documents, and they're not linked. And so it's very hard to specify work efficiently because you don't know which piece of information is correct. Another thing that you'd usually have to do back in the day is, which you still do now, but it was more manual, is checklists. So when you go on site to inspect, you have a checklist. You check things are right, check things are not right. And that gets filed in one of these binders. But the problem is, if a set piece of equipment is, bordering on the tolerance of its operational sort of performance, if that happens one week, it's recorded, put in the binder. Next week, the same thing happens when someone else does the same check, that gets put in the binder. Third week, same thing by someone else. And then the fourth week, catastrophic failure. So the whole point of, digitizing allows all that information to be gathered, and you can see trends. You can see why things might have a failure. And this is what leads us on to things like preventative maintenance. And so I will talk about that a bit more, but this is what the thing that we're trying to improve by digitizing assets, or digitizing the facility management process. So what is a good digitized work? Actually, no, sorry, I missed a bit. I actually have an anecdote for this. From my time on site. So when I was working on site, one of my tasks during an outage was to write the instruction and set to work a team to replace a valve on a holding tank. And so I wrote the instructions, found the information I needed, wrote the instructions, set the team to work. They isolated the system, replaced the valve. Well, they got the spares, replaced the valve, and then finished the job. Everything was signed off A-OK. But what happened overnight was the whole thing sprung a leak. So when I turned up to work the next day, there was the night shift manager sat at my desk looking very, very angry. And apparently the whole night crew had to spend hours cleaning up this mess. But what had happened was I had chosen the wrong sort of asset code or asset information based out of the 3 that were available, and had the wrong spares attached. So the gasket that was specified was the wrong gasket. That was the wrong gasket that was fitted. It was tying too much. And it burst. And so this is where I talk about, understanding why the, consistent and standardized naming conventions and, single source of truth for this sort of stuff really helps, because you don't make mistakes like this. If it was, everything was aligned, then I wouldn't have got in trouble, and we'd have a better morning for myself. But what is a digitized workflow? So the project or the work I did on site, that was half digitized. So they'd copied a lot of the manual entered stuff, the drawings, into a online facility management system. But what I want to try and promote at the minute is something that's completely digitized, something that was set up from the start, that has a single source for every asset in the database. And so you have a database of all your assets, and all the information is associated with that, including drawings, specifications, maybe hyperlinks to other storage locations. But that's it's much more clean and much more easy to use. Then you get to digitized checklists. So workers on site with an iPad checking off inspections, so that they can then you can amalgamate the data, as I said before. You can see insights, you can see trends, and you can make more informed decisions. You can even automate sort of the interventions by stopping plant if you know things are going to go wrong. And then on top of that, you can have IoT sensor data telling you how much at any time, how different systems are operating together. This is when we get into digital twins and even smarter maintenance platforms, and I will talk about them later. But that's the sort of, not the Pangea, but that's where we want to aim, and that's why we try and digitize the information up front when we're doing our design and construction, and that's what gets handed over. So I have an example that I'd like to share from EMSD. So let me just share a different screen. It wouldn't let me embed this video, so it has to be here. Yeah, okay. So this is the EMSD BIM AM system. So this video I quite like because it shows the before and after. And so it allows us to see the difference between a half digitized system and a digitized system. But basically their goal is to try and digitize all their workflows, and they have a system set up to upload all this information into the cloud. But yeah, all of this sort of things are meant to be connected at the end. So just skip to the. So this is an example of the fault reporting and handling and monitoring process. So this is where an operational staff goes to site, finds a problem and reports it. So you have your facility maintenance staff notices during a site or just a walk of the facility that one of the HVAC systems not working. Previously, she'd have to phone up the help desk. They would record the information, but now because everything's digitized, she has everything to hand. So before, when she phoned up, might make an error in telling her what exactly might be wrong. Now it's all either voice input, or you have much more standardized sort of faults, things like this. So it all becomes a bit more seamless. Yeah, fill in all the information, take a photo. So there's more clarity of where the contractor will eventually have to work. This is then passed to the same sort of staff, but now it's all digitized. It's quite clear, and it can be automatically assigned to different rooms for different contractors to work on. Whereas before there was a lot more manual input and then fax to the job assignment, the contractors. Then the job assignment person would phone the contractor to assign him to the task. But with a digitized system, like I said before, you can check analysis, check trends in certain systems that might be failing more frequently than others, and you might be able to find the root cause of that problem. And then also it gives a bit more transparency. So the system allows the facility maintenance staff to understand whereabouts in the process their request is, so they can understand when it might be fixed or who's assigned to it, and, the status of the job. So yeah, basically this is a fully digitized asset sort of information system, and everything will be assigned to specific assets in the cloud. Let me just go back to my slide deck. So we talked about the why, but I guess the question now is, how do we get the asset information from our design construction models into after handover onto the facility management? And the tool we use is the asset information model. So the asset information model is a collated set of information gathered from all sources that supports the ongoing management of the asset. So anything that's required to maintain and operate has to be in the asset information model. The asset information model, or AIM, can contain a variety of different things, or this sort of models, documents, specifications, survey data, maintenance records, and ownership information. This isn't the complete list, or it's also too much of a list for our certain clients. So the asset information model can be a lot, can be less. It can be what determines it is the client. And how does the client determine what they need from the asset information model is these sets of information requirements. So these documents were introduced in the ISO 19650 series. They've also been replicated in the HKIBIM standards, currently at version 2.1. But basically, we have a hierarchy of information requirements. It starts with the organizational information requirements. I will go into more detail later, but what the organizational information requirements does is it informs the asset information requirements and the project information requirements. Then the exchange information requirements basically takes direction from the AIR and PIR, and then from the EIR, the delivery teams produce the asset information model and the project information model. So what are these documents? As I said, the organizational information requirements is the highest level of information requirements in the tree of requirements, and it's there to answer high level and strategic objectives by the client or the appointing party. A good example that I always use for this is, the client is very interested in sustainability, so they might want to have they want to put a statement in their OIR that says, we want to reduce our carbon footprint by 50% in 30 years, something like that. Very high level, not very specific about how to do it. But this is where the AIR comes in. So the asset information requirements states the assets that need to be recorded and the information that needs to be recorded against those assets. So for example, in the example I gave before about the carbon footprint, in the AIR, it would state that the structural members needed certain material properties to be recorded during the design phase so that the carbon footprint can be calculated. But what happens if the statements in the OIR are not very clear? How do you write an AIR based off those very woolly, high-level sort of statements? This was a problem that was identified by the Cambridge Centre of Smart Infrastructure and Construction, and they came up with this theory about sort of line of sight. And the idea is that they add an extra step. The extra step was this thing called the functional information requirements. And basically, the idea is that you try and understand the function of your assets, what functions of your assets can answer the questions, rather than just the information that's behind it. So taking the example from before about the carbon offset, the functional information requirements that you need are the embodied carbon of elements. But then your asset information requirements would state, for all of your concrete beams, framework, columns, slabs, the the concrete grade and the steel ratio might have to be recorded as part of that to feed into your functional requirements, to feed into your organizational information requirements. So that's the line of sight between your asset information requirements and your organizational information requirements. It's trying to work out what part of your system you need to, or what parameters in the system needs to be used for your organizational information requirements. So it gives the higher ups, the organization, the answers they need. But the last two, the project information requirements and the exchange information requirements, these are the ones that more aligned to the specifying the project information model, which is the delivery model of the project. These two requirements typically state the way the client wants BIM to be used and how the project needs to be developed using BIM. The reason why the project information requirements are a higher level document is because they state the BIM uses and the BIM goals for a whole project, and the EIRs typically are for each assignment. So the example I give for these, typically I use the project that's behind me, which is the third one-way system at the airport, Hong Kong airport, because as a project, it covers, you know, dozens of consultancies, dozens of contractor tenders, but each of them have the same BIM uses. You know, they have a strategic sort of BIM uses that should be used for them all, like quantity takeoff or for 4D or whatever it might be. But then for the exact implementation for the certain assignments, like the consultancy will only be developing models to a certain level, and then the contractor will be doing more sort of thing. So there's a difference in EIR, but the PIR should be the same. But what the EIR also should do is specify when information should be added in line with the asset information requirements. And so the asset information requirements sets out a high level importance of what information needs to be in elements. But it's in the EIR where the LOIN matrix specifies when each element should be developed with regards to level of detail for graphics and level of detail for information. You know, this is responded to by the BEP, by the delivery teams, but if it's in the EIR, then the client can, you know, more closely specify why, you know, where and when the information is developed. But we know, so take example of the HVAC coolers. At tender, LODG is 200, LODI is 300. Now, LODG is a more understood term in the industry than LODI. So LODG 200, you know, most people understand it's a approximate shape, approximate location, but in the right system or sort of something like that. But LODI 300, what does that even mean? So there is a sample in the BIM standards of what an LODI specification could be, but I've seen these copied and pasted into BEPs before, and they are not specific for projects, and so they're not very useful. For the example, the one before, the HVAC coolers, LODI 300, you know, you can see here it specifies that the Omni-class code title and version need to be applied to the elements in the project. Now, if the project or the client's not even using Omni-class, then what is the purpose of filling it in? It's a complete waste of everyone's time and money. So my recommendation is if this is applied or this is in a BEP, challenge it. But also if clients want to make sure that things are right in for their uses of BIM, be it quantity takeoff, carbon assessment, operational information, then make sure that this is filled. You have a LODI specification that makes sure that you get the right information at the right time. I'd like an example from EMSD kind of highlights another wrinkle in this, in that, so in the EMSD BIM asset management guidelines, specifically the Appendix E, it goes into detail about how Revit elements or Revit families should be put together for certain assets, for different things, but for this example is the air handling unit. So in the air handling unit, it specifies that, you know, different components within the air handling unit should be separate families. So for your energy recovery, your cooling coils, your fans, your filters, this sort of thing. But that should also be reflected in your LOI and matrix, so that you can define exactly when the information gets expanded on. Because ultimately, this might not need to be done before within the design phase. It might be only that the contractor might need to pick this up. So you can use the LOI matrix to communicate that to the different teams. You can also, for things like that are inside the machine, you could possibly use families that are only 2D information, but they have an LDI that's appropriate for asset management. So there's various ways you can get around it. But as I'll get onto, the EMSD guidelines are quite specific about how they want things to be built. But on the flip side is the ArchST's BIM guidelines. Again, this is version 3.0. So they have a similar asset management requirement. And so when you break down a door, do you need to record an asset code against the door handle or the glazing or the lock? According to the ArchST's guidelines, these elements, this information can be added as parameters, so asset information, rather than a separate asset in its own right. So this is, I like to think of this as a good sort of counterpoint for when you're specifying, if you are specifying an asset information requirements, have a think about what you specify as an asset. Do you specify your air handling unit as one, and then you have parameters that specify the different components? Do you split it up into different assets and different families, or do you do what the sort of like this door and just have one asset and a multitude of parameters? Obviously, a balance needs to be had, but also you need to have an idea of what your teams maintain on site. Is the fan inside the air handling unit important enough that it needs its own asset number, so that you can record maintenance sort of performance against it, or operational performance against it? So there's something I want to cover now. It's quite a common thing to see in this, talking about asset information management, and it's COBE. And no, it's not this guy. It's actually got nothing to do with him. It's this. It's construction, operation, building information exchange. So this is a classification system for assets that was developed by the American Army when they tried to understand their entire estate in terms of what they have. Because it's very, imagine the size of it. They needed to have a system, so they developed COBE. The problem with COBE, or the problem that I have with COBE, is the way it's specified on projects, because people just ask for COBE. They don't tell you what assets that you actually need to apply COBE to get the best out of it. So as I say here, it's not a replacement for an AIR. It's a good classification system you can use in an AIR, but it cannot be a replacement of it. But to go a bit further into sort of client responsibilities, we've worked with a few clients about doing this sort of thing, about when to specify AIRs and things. And quite an important thing to consider is the timing of the AIRs, because in the projects that we work on, a lot of the time when we have the kickoff meetings and things, and they say, okay, we want you to write the AIR. And then we ask, so who can we talk to in the maintenance and operational teams? And we get the response of, oh, we haven't actually hired them yet, because the project's got a 10-year timeline, and we don't need to hire them until we are a bit further down the road. So there's an important part about timing for this. The AIR still might need to record things like if you want to record carbon, if you want to record your quantity takeoff, things like this, you might want to document in your AIR. So you might still need to have that up front for the design and delivery portion. But if you want your asset information requirements to state the requirements for operation, for maintenance, it needs to be in before the contractor's assigned. Obviously, you can do it after, but the likelihood is you'll get a VO, and you'll have to pay for it. No one will do this for free, because depending on the size of the project, it can be quite an onerous task. Another important thing to consider is making sure all stakeholders are engaged when you're documenting the AIR, making sure that you understand from a operation point of view, as well as a client point of view, what is considered an asset, what do you need to record performance against, what do you need to record your maintenance activities against. And the people that know this are the people on the ground doing the work. So you need to have the stakeholder engagement. And that kind of feeds into the next point about what is considered an asset. You know, you need to have that, the AIR needs to have that list of things that you consider an asset, and then it sort of cascades down and through the requirements into the models, and that's what gets handed over. But yeah, finally, the hierarchy of an asset is quite important as well. So where do you define what is an asset? Is it the equipment unit, where we have here a electrical cabinet? Is it the equipment subunit, so the racks inside that, or is it the component? Is it the the panels on the front of that rack? Is it the parts? Is it the screws that hold the whole thing together? Obviously it probably won't be the parts part, but it might be somewhere in the middle, depending on the way your teams operate and maintain your asset. So at this point, I'd like to talk through the EMSD guidelines. We've worked a bit with it, and I want to try and share some experiences and some things to look out for if you have to align or have to produce models in line with these guidelines. So the version 3.0, it was released, I think, last year. Yeah, 2022, sorry. And it covers a lot of things. So it covers things like modeling standards, asset relationship instructions, and asset information model upload instructions, as well as all the codification and all the classification things you would expect. Some things to watch out for. The system configuration has to be, you have to set up your folder structures, that you contain all your information, that you zip it all up, that you upload to the system. It all has to be in line with what they say. Otherwise, it doesn't go into this thing called the Asset Information Management Platform. It's quite a specific way they like to organize it, and information gets shared amongst different platforms as well. So if it's not right, things might go into the CDE correctly, but then it might not get taken out into the other systems correctly. So they're quite specific about it. Also, the Revit families, as I said before, they are quite specific about the way Revit families need to be, and they do, for most things, they do consider assets at a sub-component level. So for the AHU, it was, you have to have Revit families for different things. For the electrical panels, you have to have racks as individual components. And it might make sense if you think about it, because in the racks, there might be different components for different systems, like power and comms and different things. So, it makes sense, but it's very rare that you see a model that has a rack that's built that way. So it's something to keep in mind. Another thing, as I said before, is the asset relationships. So in terms of the connectivity between different systems. So for this example of the electrical rack, that would be connected to a bunch of lights, or a bunch of sort of switchboards, or a bunch of other things. And so the connection between this specific asset and all the other assets needs to be typed out manually into a spreadsheet, which is uploaded onto the system. And that's how they record the asset relationships. And it's a time-consuming process, to be perfectly frank. So if you have to get your project to comply to these guidelines, I suggest making sure that you've set out enough time to actually do it properly, because it's quite a onerous task. So I'd like to just discuss the difference between the project information model and the asset information model. A lot of times when we get to the end of projects, it's not really specified what needs to be handed over, so everything just gets dumped and handed over. Whereas what clearly should define the difference between the project information model and the asset information model is the PIM is all about what they need during the project delivery phase. So this might be your native models, this might be your calculations and drawings and things. Once that's handed over at the end, it's still a project information model, can be archived, and then reused if there's an A&A works, for example. Whereas the asset information model, the only information there should be in relation to the operation phase of the asset. That can include 3D information. It doesn't have to, but there's always you give a Revit model that has all the asset information in it, but then whose responsibility is it to strip out the 𝗪𝗍, from that model to, use it in your systems? It needs to be clearly defined up front in the asset information requirements, in the exchange information requirements. What is the format of the handover information for both of these? Otherwise, you'll just end up having to do rework yourself to get it into the system correctly. So what does the AIM look like? I'm sure you've seen a lot of not gimmicky, but like sort of 3D model perspectives, and you click on a equipment, it pops up all the asset information, all the specifications, all that. That is an asset information model, but it doesn't need to be like that. That's not the only sort of variation of an asset information model. It can be just like you can see here, which is the 𝗪𝗍 database, and it's just a list of assets and their associated information, as well as hyperlinks to specifications or whatever it might be. Both are a asset information model. Yeah, and so as I said, it doesn't have to be 3D. It doesn't even have to be 2D. It can just be asset relationships in a database. But the important thing, again, is it has to contain all of the information that's required to maintain and operate the asset. There are some guidelines in the HKIBIM standards. Well, not guidelines, more, general direction. So as it says here, likely to include but not limited to. So it's down to the prerogative of the client to say, actually, I don't need the IFC model, or I don't need room data sheets. What I do need is a digital O&M manuals and 𝗪𝗍 data sheets. That's all I need. So it's a pick and choose sort of thing. A lot of that does depend on the platform that you choose as well. So it's very much down to the client. Something else that I think is quite important to discuss is what happens when you need to update the asset information model. Who's responsible for that? It comes down to the client. They can either obviously contract it out, or they can do it themselves. This is taken from the HKIBIM standards, and it shows the upkeep of the model if you're using 𝗪𝗍, or if you're using just an asset information list template, which is similar, but it's just another way of listing out your assets. But I won't go into detail, but there are some workflows that we can use, and it's an important thing because one of the reasons why I wanted to do this talk was to talk about this, and it's the golden thread of information. Now, the reason this term came out was because an independent review was conducted after the Grenfell fire in the UK. 72 people died when a tower block went on fire. And during the investigation, what they found was a lot of the information that should have been maintained and kept regarding material properties of the cladding and fire, the sort of the state of the fire extinguishers, this sort of thing. It wasn't recorded, it wasn't kept, and so people that were living there didn't have access to this information. People that were in the emergency services didn't have this information. And the reason why they recommend that you keep this record is so that emergency services, if they know that there's a risk, a higher risk for this specific building, they might ask for more fire protection inside, or they would respond quicker. Alternatively, for the people inside it, they can make better informed decisions about whether they live there or not, or how they live their lives and how they live there. They might be more safe when it comes to open flames in their house, for example. But if they don't know this information, then they can't make that informed decision. These recommendations have actually become legislation in the UK under the Building Safety Act. And I think it's quite an important thing to highlight, and I think it's something that a lot of people should take on board in Hong Kong as well. There's a lot of buildings with a lot of structures getting built all over the place, but if there's no record of it, it's hard to know who's living there, what's it made of, all this sort of stuff. So it's quite a prescient sort of point for us here as well. And this is just a diagrammatical sort of representation of the golden thread of information. So after the model is handed over, the information still should grow with the changes to the asset information model. So just to clarify, or just to go over a few points about responsibilities, the client's responsible for documenting the AIR pre-appointment. Obviously, if there's not enough information, they can redo it for the sort of pre-handover stage. They can delegate this out, obviously. They can contract someone to write the AIR for them. And then during the pre-handover stage, the delivery teams are responsible for updating the asset information in the models so that in line with the LODI specification, so that the handover is successful. The client is also the responsible party for checking the information in these models is accurate. They can obviously delegate this out. We've done this sort of role as BIM auditors on projects, and it's a very onerous task, and I don't think it should be taken lightly, and that's why I highlight it here. But if you get handed over a model as the client and you don't check it, and then you try and load it into your system, the contractor's gone. You're left with a bunch of information that's not very useful to you. And then during operation, again, it's the appointed party's responsibility for the upkeep, maintaining this golden thread of information. But yeah, any alterations to the asset information model can be done by the owners and operators themselves, or it can be contracted out again. That becomes the PIM, and they update it and then hand it over, and that can become the AIM again. So moving on a bit onto platforms. So for facility management, the platforms that are typically used are split into one or two fields. So they have the computerized maintenance management system, or CMMS, and the intelligent maintenance management platform, or IMMP. Digital twins, you can argue whether they would be used in facility management or not, but they are another sort of aspect of this. The traditional sort of asset register connected to work orders, connected to breakdown schedules, all this sort of stuff, that is a CMMS. Typically, when you add things like real-time data to understand predictive maintenance, this sort of thing, this is where the IMMPs come in. And this is a new trend in the industry. And then digital twins do similar job as the IMMP, but they don't typically have like facility management or asset management applications inside them either. So it's just a diagrammatical sort of way of representing them. So I'm just going to talk about a few platforms now. EcoDomus, I'm sure a few of you have had experience using. They've only recently been bought over by Siemens, which I didn't realize until I started doing this preparing this presentation. But essentially, it's a digital twin platform, but it does have good interactions with CMS systems. Like the APIs talk together quite well. But you can upload BIM models, IFC models directly to the platform, and it does accept COBie data structures as well. So it is quite a useful sort of platform if you want the 3D visualization. Other platforms include Autodesk Tandem. So Autodesk Tandem is it's a Autodesk product, and being an Autodesk product, it's very good at handling things like Revit, also via BIM 360. So it's quite good at accepting those sorts of information, but it doesn't have any CMMS functionality, so it's hard to use it as a facility management system. It possibly can be used as asset management. But they have recently linked it to operational data, sensor data as well. So just a quick overview of what it can do for those who don't know. For those actually who have the AEC license for Autodesk, this is included in it. So you can upload models and have a play. It's quite good. If you have classifications built into your BIM models as well, it's very good at filtering through and understanding how many doors you have and what sort of doors you have, this sort of thing. It's quite an easy sort of filter for assets. But then we go skip to the end. We find that they also have links to IoT sensor data. It'll heat map temperatures. It will, heat map occupancy. It'll do this sort of thing. So it can be, used in addition to some facility management systems. So I think it's quite a good tool, but it's if you're wanting a full facility management tool, it doesn't quite go that far. One of the few true IMMP tools that I found was this product called Facilio. It does accept Autodesk files for the 3D navigation, but it also pulls in live IoT data, so it can, you can start using it for understanding the performance of equipment or assets, to understand if it's alerts for predictive maintenance and things. And it's got good integration with the facility management tools as well. Like at the start. Can you hear me now? 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 Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. As I said, it's a digital twin platform, so it has ESG insights as well as building energy review and carbon assessment, this sort of thing. But yeah, it does have a app that does do facility management as well, so it can function as one of those IMMS systems. Not the problem with it, but the more apps you add to it, the more costly it gets. So it again comes down to client needs and wants. This is a good, sorry, just to interject for that. If you are a client that wants to look at things as a portfolio, it goes down to your, what becomes an asset. If your asset is buildings, then that's what you need to document in your, asset requirements as well. Sorry, it just came to me there. Yeah, the rest is pretty gimmicky stuff, but yeah, it's quite a powerful platform. But I think if you're looking into these sorts of things, it's well worth a investigation into. And it kind of leads me on quite well to my last slide about sustainability. A lot of the examples I've given about carbon footprint and all the rest of it, trying to highlight the fact that a lot of the reasons why we do all this stuff is to, to improve things like, or start doing things like preventative maintenance, understanding the energy usage of buildings and assets so that we can make it more efficient. And that all leads back into sustainability. But to do this, again, it needs to be stated in your OIR, the AIR, and that will feed down, cascade down into the delivery teams and then into your operation. And so just to quickly summarize, always start at the operational objectives from the client side. If that's set out clearly, the high level objectives are clearly defined, then everything else is straightforward. Make sure all stakeholders have their say. So make sure you talk to everyone, including your facility maintenance management people. Not all facility management platforms are built the same, so you don't have to have 3D geometry if you don't want it. Obviously, it does give you the advantage of navigating through your building or your asset to find certain things or see what's connected to what. So it's up to you. But finally, the golden thread of information, I think, is quite an important thing to last with. Is as long if we can keep this sort of information going and building throughout the operation of the asset, it can lead to better safety performance, more sort of open understanding of what materials are in a building, how it's being put together, this sort of thing. So I think it's quite an important thing to leave you on. So that's the end of my presentation. Thanks very much for listening to me. If there's any questions, I don't know, has there been any on the chat or? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Ewan, for the sharing. That is very useful. So now we are into the Q&A section. So if members, if you have any question, want to ask or want even share a little bit more about his experience, please type your question in the Q&A box. Maybe just start the question from myself first. Ewan, I heard that you have been working on the project in Thailand, right?
Mm.
So how's the situation? How's the BIM industry in Thailand?
It's very it's early stages. So they are the big drivers are the big developers. So like I had on the screen, it was a big property developer for the TOD and a big sort of rail contract sort of developer for the high-speed rail. It's BIM is not standardized like it is here. There's not a government push to mandate BIM. So there's still a few steps behind us, but I think the more clients use it, or the more not clients, but the more developers use it, the more people understand the uses, and it'll build and build and build. I think the promotion of things like digital twins and smart campuses and things will only show what the whole point of this is, and to improve performance of operation. Because I mean, every time we started a conversation with clients, the first thing they asked was the return of investment, which is a very hard thing to define, but I think there's still reluctance of certain people within every organization about doing making the whole workflow around BIM rather than traditional 2D. The costs are going to go up, but it's trying to convince them that those costs are worthwhile and they will get their money back. But putting an actual dollar on that is very, very hard.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you. And I think I have the second question, because I saw that you have been working on the rail project in Thailand. So do you think in terms of the asset management or the ARR, is there any difference from any traditional project, just like the buildings project? Because something like the airport project, the people will say, oh, the asset IAR, the asset requirement could be a little bit different from the buildings. So what about the railways?
I'd say railways is similar to airport in that there's the railway out here, but I think it is different in that the assets are different. So but they do have rail systems, so things like overhead lines, like signaling systems, like all the safety important stuff really needs to be managed as assets. Things like sleepers and ballast and stuff that would be maintained, but I'm sure things like site inspections you'd be able to find out. You wouldn't need to have a specific asset around that, I'd say. But I think it's same requirements, but just different sort of equipment. You don't have much of most of the asset information requirements around buildings is mainly the building services, right? Where it's just different systems mainly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we have one question from the Chen Ka-sing. So he said, even you have been participate in international and local projects of many types of projects. Can you share with us the challenges of on BIM for asset management in Hong Kong? For example, the public sector versus the private sectors, readiness of BIM AM platform, definition of assets, etc.
So the challenges are mainly around the specification of it. Sometimes the client might not have a platform in mind. They might not have a asset system in line, so a classification system in mind. So it's hard to define what needs to go in that before you start the project. So because everyone's trying to catch up whilst the projects are ongoing, it can cause quite a lot of problems. And that's when we get things like specifying this needs to be 𝗪𝗍, and then you have the issues of people not wanting to do the project or to do the work because they don't believe it's going to be used. And then there's also the problem of what's I going to say, too much information that are too much information being used and not utilized enough. Basically, too much information being produced and not being checked by the client enough to be used on site. There's still the clients again are still trying to catch up with the likes of their BIM teams so that they can check these things properly. And so sometimes handover models are not checked and then they aren't usable, basically.
Thank you. So we have another question from Simon. So could you tell us anything about the Open BIM implementation on infrastructure projects? Do you have an example of the Open BIM and asset information models?
I don't have any examples of Open BIM and asset information models. The experience we have on the likes of MTR for our design work is that we use IFC as a translator between things like Bentley OpenRail, trying to get that into Revit environments, into Navisworks environments so we can check coordination. And we use that quite a lot actually for both Bentley and also Civil 3D. But with regards to asset information models, I mean, I believe 𝗪𝗍 is considered by some to be an Open BIM standard because it's quite a, it's not owned by anyone. It's quite a open standard that people can use. So I have seen 𝗪𝗍 used on different projects, like the EMSD actually have a 𝗪𝗍-like version of part of their asset definition is based on 𝗪𝗍-like, which is a smaller breakdown of the full 𝗪𝗍 asset classification. And can a BIM consultant company involved into the asset management industry? Is there any core competence or license required? I wouldn't say any license required. Breaking into that industry is more about working with the clients that you know, understanding what their aspirations are with regards to managing assets, and then you can talk to them about what sort of information that needs to be defined, or the challenges they're having in converting what they're getting handed by contractors into their asset management system. And if you can find that the challenges that clients are having, then you can offer solutions.
Okay, so Wing, how to encourage client to invest in? Is there any good idea? Except for an ROI, what you just said.
I mean, the one, rather than the ROI, the specific dollar number, being able to show a client that the coordination issues that you can solve, examples of coordination issues that you can solve during the design, in the sort of design phase. It's quite an easy thing to say. If this was actually done on site, you'd end up having to break a slab, or you'd have to do, redo certain parts of the work, and the cost will go up on the contractor side. So it's trying to show an evidence of how during the design phase, the coordination work that you do does add benefit. I think that's one of the ways. There are probably many others, but I can't think off the top of my head.
Okay, let me check if there's still any questions.
If not, I'll take the last question then.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I'll just keep.
Yeah.
Wait for a few seconds. This is if there's any other questions.
No, like
Okay, so I'll take the last questions. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for coming all over to here and then to sit together with me and Kevin and together with the chairman Simon to do the presentations. Very much. Well, before we end this, but thank you very much for your time. So I'll just have one question, right? We have been implementing BIM for so many mega projects, and you've been working on so many projects on international projects too. So when it comes to asset management, when it comes to BIM model handover, we wanted the design consultants to input these design informations, right? How could you comment on the design consultants' scopes or their responsibilities and the future contractors that's going to work on inputting all of these asset informations or non-graphical informations, right? No, is that there got to be a lot of these automations be involved, right? There's got to be some commitment to it. We tend to push it to the very last minute, right? When everybody was trying to push projects to completions, the ultimate aim and the golden sentence that I always hear was, our goal is to get the building up, right?
Yeah.
So we often neglect the time, right?
Sure.
Which could be one challenge, right?
Yeah, no, I understand. Yeah, I get what you mean. Like because every project in Hong Kong has the same time, sort of pressures. But yeah, the addition of asset information is always left at the end. As you said, there is automation that you can use, dynamo scripting, graphical scripting, whatever it might be. But it's not just adding the information into the model, it's the checking of that, making sure it's in line with all the requirements. Because I'm sure as the client yourself, I'm sure your team is responsible for checking that information is correct.
Yeah.
But doing that on every single element is very challenging. So how do you check it? Do you use automation yourself?
We have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's as I said, it's both the adding and checking of the asset information to make sure it's right. It does take time, and I think going through projects, we need to remind contractors and consultants that you need to start this process earlier. That's what we've done a few times when we've been modeling our projects as well. You get to the point of no return and say you need to start this work now, or else you're not going to hit the handover date sort of thing. So.
That's very.
We have a last question from Chen Ka-sing as well. So I think his question is asking, although it is a project of normal size, it contains a large number of information. For example, regular building projects in Hong Kong. Do you have any suggestions on how to make it easier to manage such a large number of the information? For example, any coding techniques or other suggestions to make it more efficient to manage the informations?
So as I said before, like there is a bunch of automation thing because asset information ultimately will be taken out into a database or a spreadsheet. So the input, you realize that it can be also inputted from the same sort of process. So simple Dynamo scripts, you can fill parameters into Revit families or whatever it might be, even Civil 3D now, using simple scripting to pull data from Excel and populate the parameters in the models. So then you just need to manage your Excel spreadsheets to do that. Similar things can be done for different software as well. Yes, automation basically is your answer.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. Thank you very much. I think that's all for us for the today's sharing sessions. Once again, thank you very much for even to come to us to share those experience on your asset management. So that is the end of today's sharing session. Thank you very much. Goodbye and take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're doing very good on time.
Just on time.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you.